Hi, I'm Joe Saunders with Miniature Landscape Hobbies. In this video, we're going to pull out all the stops. We're going to paint a T-34 by Battlefront Miniatures for a competition that I'm about to enter. The Great YouTube Paint-Off Part 2. There are a great number of resources on YouTube for miniature painters and wargamers, and also a really close-knit community, which I'm very fortunate to be a member of. Recently, my sister channel over at Lack of Foresight Gaming has decided to put on a new painting contest. If you haven't been to Lack of Foresight Gaming's channel yet, please go take a look. It's an excellent channel. He's decided to have a big new competition involving lots of 1/100 scale and 28mm historical painters to come together to just basically flex our painting and model building muscles. Of course, I was really happy to jump at the chance and enter something in, well, 1/100 scale. Over the next few weeks, you'll see my competition entry develop. It's going to be a whole diorama. But I figure I'd start with painting a T-34 because I want the diorama to have sort of an Eastern Front feel. Now, in order to do this, I wasn't just going to settle for any old model. I was really going to pull out all the stops and paint pretty much to the best of my ability. Now, I'm a wargame painter mainly, so even though I like to paint to a fairly high standard, I usually don't go whole hog on any of my models. In this case, I think I will. As always, I start with a black undercoat. Over top of this, I decided to spray some white. I spray it in patches on the specific raised areas, trying to feather the edges out. Sometimes this is called the zenithal approach. Really what I'm wanting to do is give a brighter substrate on areas where the sun would be hitting more directly on the model, so that the greens and other colors I put over top of it just show to be a bit richer. Now I apply olive green to the model. I spray it lightly so that the white underneath can show through, bringing an extra level of depth to the color on the raised surfaces. When this is dry, it's time for a midtone, and I do this by making a 50-50 mix of Vallejo Model Air Sand and the same olive green I've been using. I go ahead and spray this back over the model, focusing on leaving the darker colors in the depths and moving the brighter colors up towards the upper edges where the sun would hit the model directly. Now it's time for an airbrush highlight. I mix 3 parts Vallejo Model Air Sand to 1 part Vallejo Model Air Olive Green and go ahead and continue to spray. This time spraying very lightly only on the upper edges and the leading edges of the plates. When this is dry, I decide the model can use one more highlight, so I get out some Midtone paint, add about 1/4 white ivory paint, and dry brush it over the whole model. For any wargaming model, this is probably where I would stop work on the base color. But this model is for competition, so I'm going to keep putting detail into it. And I do this by taking out my AK Interactive weathering pencils, which are an awesome product, and begin putting some shades of green in different spots on the model. I wet the pencils and just draw the lines right on. Then I go ahead and blend it with a dry brush. I use light green in some spots to accentuate the raised portions, and I use olive green in the deeper recesses to heighten the shadows. The green base is now done on the model, and it's looking really good with lots of contrast in the colors and the tones. But it's time to start adding real serious visual interest. I decide to do this by putting some stripes on the vehicle. And to set this up correctly, I begin with some masking tape masks. I cut some regular masking tape into thin strips. I then go ahead and apply it to the turret carefully so that I can create lines around the sides and a cross shape on the top. This is intended to look like the invasion stripes that the Soviets used at the Battle of Berlin. It might be out of place with the rest of the diorama, but I think it looks really good, and it pays to have some intricate painting details. Having masked everything off, now I go in with my white paint and using my airbrush spray it lightly around the inside of where I masked off to create the stripes. When this has had a few minutes to dry, I peel the masking away to reveal the finished stripes. Because the stripes are looking a little uniform and I want the tank to have a lot of weathering, I get out some olive green and go back and paint some chips right into the white itself. Now it's time to apply the decals, sometimes referred to as water slide transfers. I think that this fairly early point in the painting process is likely the best time to apply them. I know a lot of model builders and wargamers that add them usually as the final step instead. But if you don't get the weathering or other colors layered over top of it, they tend to look unrealistic. After this is all done, the model is now ready for a couple coats of satin varnish. The satin varnish is used to protect the acrylic layers and also the effects of the weathering pencils from the upcoming steps, which involves enamels. When the varnish is dry, then I go ahead and get out my enamel panel liner, in this case dark brown by Tamiya, and go ahead and start applying it into the crevices and the deep recessed areas on the model. This of course will create definition. It now seems like a good time to get the base colors on the tracks done, so I get out my dark rest weathering pencil and go over the tracks. I also apply it in a patchy manner over the exhausts. After that, I get out a small piece of sponge, hold it in a pair of tweezers, and put some Midtone paint on it. I mix this with a little bit of ivory paint so that it comes out brighter than the regular highlights of the model. Then using this, I go ahead and start blotting on spots where the chips would apply on the tank, focusing at the leading edges, the fenders, and anywhere where I think wear and tear would occur. Switching to hull red, I use a small brush and go ahead and fill small dots of rust red into the middle of the chips and the scratches. I don't do every chip and scratch, but I do them more or less at random to apply deeper damage to the bodywork of the tank here and there. Now it's time to go to work on the weathering, and I decide to start with my rust tones. I get out my AK Interactive weathering pencils and wet the tips and apply several different colors to the model. After it's had a few minutes to dry on the model, I grab a damp brush and go ahead and blend the color into the background. With this I create some streaks, and also in spots I can deepen the shadows with them. Because dirt and dust will naturally accumulate over top of smaller details, now I also move on to painting the tools and the stowage on the tank. I paint most of it old wood, give it a highlight with deck tan, and a quick wash with a dark brown ink. When this is finished, I then seal it all in with another layer of satin varnish. Now I take out my weathering pencils again, and let me tell you, I really love these things. And then I go ahead and start wetting the tips and adding some more colors, this time streaking earth and dust. Once I've put them on here and there, I target the areas on the tank where high wear and tear would occur and where dust, dirt, and mud would splash from its movement, and then I just go back and blend it all in. Now I cap this all off with a thin coat of matte varnish, and then lastly I took out my gunmetal weathering pencil and went around the edges of the tracks. I wait until after the varnish is dried to put the final metallic colors on, because I don't want them to be dulled down by the varnish itself. Oh yeah, and then one last thing. I took out a very small bit in my pin vise, drilled out a hole in the top, and inserted a piece of plastic that I made from a sprue to resemble an aerial. We'll cover this later in a different video. And with that, the project was done. Now I had a model of a T-34 that had lots of detail and character, and that I had really just applied my best to. I was really happy with the nuances of the color and all the visual interest that it created. Most importantly, I thought it would make a pretty good centerpiece for the diorama I was going to build. Now all I need to do is get my terrain building mojo going and build the diorama. So stay tuned for more on this project in the future. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. Some of my upcoming videos will continue to build upon this series, and I hope to get into depth on how I prepare for Lack of Foresight Gaming's new upcoming painting competition. In the meantime, you might want to go over to Lack of Foresight Gaming's channel right here on YouTube and subscribe and check out everything he has to offer. There you can also learn more about the other YouTubers that are participating in the contest. Thanks for watching. Please remember to subscribe if you haven't done so already. And if you'd like to contribute, my channel is supported entirely by its viewers. You can check out the links below, where you can join my Patreon or check out my Etsy store. See you next time, and until then, remember to keep building life in miniature.